There are moments in life when reality feels thin, as if the world we know could peel back like film and reveal something just beneath it. A hallway that seems longer than it should be. A town that looks the same, but isn't. A song you swear you've never heard, until you realize you already know the words. Tonight, we're listening to 3 real accounts of people who believe they slipped through those cracks into worlds almost identical to ours, yet hauntingly different. Each story is documented, each one still debated, and none of them have ever been explained. So settle in, and remember, the line between our world and another might be thinner than you think. Good evening, and welcome to Midnight Horror Society. Here we take the strange and the chilling and tell them slowly, like whispers meant for the night. Before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe only if you feel at home here. In the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always comforting to see how many of us are awake together in the dark. So dim the lights. Let the sound of the night, rain, crickets, or just the quiet of your room settle around you. Get comfortable. And when you're ready, let's step into tonight's story. She woke to a ceiling she recognized, and a world that didn't feel like hers anymore. The difference was small at first. The way the morning light stepped across the room felt off, softer, like it had found a different path to the same wall. The sheets under her hands didn't match what her memory was certain she'd fallen asleep in the night before. The color and texture were close, but not right. The detail shouldn't have mattered. But the mind notices what it uses to stay steady, and her mind had always relied on small, steady things. She stood, took in the room slowly, and tried to name the feeling. It wasn't fear. Fear is sharp. This was softer and heavier, like fog. Things were where they should be, yet each carried a slight mismatch, an arrangement, a smell, the hum from outside. Everything looked real. Everything felt wrong. For 41 years, Lerina had lived a life defined by routine. She was a civil servant in Seville, Spain, dependable, steady, the kind of woman who carried her life like clockwork. 20 years in the same government department, same commute, same co-workers, same coffee shop stop at 8:30 sharp. She lived alone in a quiet apartment, the kind filled with small tokens of stability, framed pictures of her parents, 2 potted plants by the kitchen window, neatly stacked bills. Her life wasn't dramatic, but it was hers. In the months before that strange morning, Lerina had gone through a breakup. She had left her long-term boyfriend of 7 years and started seeing someone new, a man named Agustin, who lived just a few blocks away. The kind of soft reset people make in middle age when they're ready to breathe again. It was a life of order, familiarity. Until July 16th, 2008, when the universe blinked. Her car was parked exactly where she'd left it the night before. The streets of Seville glowed warm in the summer light. Traffic lights, corner shops, even the stray cat by the bakery, all where they should be. The unease started to fade. Maybe it really was nothing. But when Lerina arrived at her office, the first jolt hit. The reception area was the same beige tile floor, the same potted fern wilting by the copier. But there were faces she didn't recognize. New people chatting casually, like they'd been there forever. She smiled awkwardly, made her way down the corridor to her office, the same hallway she had walked for 2 decades, and froze. The nameplate on the door wasn't hers. It bore a stranger's name. At first, she thought she must have gotten off on the wrong floor. She checked the number by the elevator, 4th floor, same as always. Her office door was in the right place. It just didn't belong to her anymore. Confused, she pulled out her work laptop, logged in, and checked the internal directory. Her name was still listed, but not under the same department. According to the company records, she'd been reassigned months ago to a division she'd never heard of under a manager she didn't know. It didn't make sense. No one had told her anything about a transfer. She hadn't even applied for one. Lerina stood there staring at the screen, that same sinking feeling in her stomach growing heavier. Her desk, gone. Her nameplate, gone. Her life in this building had shifted sideways just slightly, like a picture frame nudged out of line. Had she been fired? Was this some kind of mistake? Her hands were trembling as she packed up and left the building. By the time she got back to her car, she was shaking. She called in sick, said she wasn't feeling well, and drove straight to her doctor. Maybe this was exhaustion. Maybe something neurological. They ran every test they could think of. No drugs, no alcohol, no signs of psychosis. She was perfectly healthy. That night, back in her apartment, she checked everything she could. Her driver's license, credit cards, bank statements. All the information matched what she remembered. Same name, same address, same account numbers. The world looked the same, but she didn't belong in it. Lerina thought of Agustin, her boyfriend of 4 months. Maybe he could ground her, remind her she wasn't losing her mind. She dialed his number, eager to hear his voice. A stranger answered. "No one by that name lives here," the man said flatly. She hung up, convinced she'd misdialed. She tried again, and again. Each time, the same voice. No Agustin. No trace of his son, whom she'd met, played with, and shared dinners with. They didn't exist. She walked to his house, the same one she'd been to countless times before. The gate looked familiar. The garden layout was the same. But the family living there wasn't him. They looked at her like she was insane. Lerina felt the air leave her chest. The man she had loved for months, gone, erased like a paragraph deleted from reality. Desperate, she called her sister, trying to explain what was happening. Her sister's reaction made her stomach twist even tighter. "Lerina, what are you talking about? You and your boyfriend never broke up." "What?" "No, we separated 6 months ago." Her sister laughed nervously. "No, you didn't. You're still together. He's been calling the house asking about you." Lerina froze. Her ex, the man she knew she had left, was, in this version of the world, still her partner. Their breakup had never happened. The new boyfriend she remembered so vividly, the dinners, the conversations, the sun, had never existed. She went to a psychiatrist. She told them everything, the sheets, the job, the boyfriend who vanished, the one who never left. They told her it was stress, that she had imagined it all, that the mind sometimes creates false memories during trauma. But the memories felt too real, specific, textured, lived. The psychiatrist said she might have had a nervous breakdown, that perhaps she'd conflated dreams with a waking life. Yet when they tested her, her cognitive function was normal. Her perception was sharp, her memory consistent. It was reality itself that wasn't. In a last effort, Lerina hired a private investigator to look into Agustin. She gave him the man's full name, description, where he worked, even details about his son's school. Weeks passed. The investigator called. He'd found nothing. No records, no addresses, no documentation. No Agustin, anywhere in Seville. To the rest of the world, he had never existed. Her family began avoiding the topic. When she mentioned her younger sister's shoulder surgery, a minor operation that Lerina clearly remembered helping with, her mother and siblings just stared at her blankly. "What surgery?" her mother said. Lerina laughed in disbelief. "The one 2 months ago. You were there too." They looked at her with quiet pity. There had been no surgery, no scars, nothing. Each day revealed another fracture in her world. Subtle, small, but devastating. Clothes in her closet she didn't remember buying. Emails missing from her inbox. Posts from her blog vanished without explanation. It wasn't just her relationships or her job. It was her timeline. And yet the rest of the world remained eerily identical. The news headlines matched what she remembered. Political events, sports results, even celebrity gossip, all the same. The world outside hadn't changed. Only the world around her had. And that was somehow worse. With nowhere else to set her story down, she turned to the one place that lets private confusion become public record: the internet. In 2008, Lerina García Gordo posted her account online. No theatrics, no conspiracies. Just a careful list of what had been and what was now. The language was steady. She described the day she woke up and noticed the sheets, the way her job no longer lined up with her memory of her own position, the boyfriend who existed in her life for 4 months and left no trace anywhere, the family memory that contradicted itself, the doctor's clean tests, the psychiatrist's polite skepticism, the investigator's report with nothing in it. She wrote one sentence people still quote: "The differences are small, but they change everything." She never claimed to have the answer. She never insisted on a theory. Some readers supplied one for her: parallel timelines, a slip between two close realities. Others treated her account as a case study: grief, stress, a mind trying to protect itself. She didn't argue. She only repeated what she knew. She was sane. Her life wasn't where she had left it. The post spread quietly. Spanish-language forums kept copies. Translations drifted through communities that trade in anomalies, the way fishermen trade stories about waters that don't show on charts. People debated her, defended her, dismissed her. She kept her language the same: plain, factual, measured. There are only two truths in the story of Lerina García Gordo. She believed, without question, that she had woken up in a version of the world that was not her own, and no one ever managed to prove her wrong. Some people dismiss it as delusion. Others whisper that maybe she simply adjusted, blending quietly into whichever version of life she landed in. But her account remains online, a soft echo from 2008 that still finds its way into new corners of the internet. Even now, her message lingers in digital archives, a cry for help from someone who swore she'd slipped sideways through reality and never found her way back. Some believe Lerina García Gordo suffered a psychological break. Others think she experienced what physicists call a quantum decoherence event, where the boundary between two realities collapses for just one observer. And maybe that's what really happened. Maybe Lerina didn't vanish. Maybe we did. Because in her version of the world, we are the ones who don't exist. The storm came out of nowhere. Rain hammered against the windshield so hard the wipers only smeared it. Thunder rolling across the San Bernardino Valley like someone dragging a chain through the sky. Carol McKellany leaned forward over the wheel, knuckles white, headlights cutting through sheets of water. She was alone, halfway to a sheepdog trial in Paris, when a green sign flickered through the downpour: Riverside, next exit. She hadn't been back in years. Her family's hometown. The place she always promised to revisit when life slowed down. Something about that sign pulled at her. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe guilt. Maybe fate. She took the exit. Carol had grown up in Riverside, California, on a modest street lined with pepper trees and chain-link fences. Her childhood was simple: Saturday chores, Sunday church, summer afternoons at her grandmother's kitchen table. But adulthood scattered the family. Her parents moved north, friends drifted away, and she left for a quieter life near the mountains. Still, the town lived in her memory like a photograph, a fixed image of home she could always count on. So, on that March afternoon in 2006, when rain blurred the freeway and her mind wandered, she thought, why not stop by? It had been too long. Maybe she could grab coffee near the old university strip, maybe even visit the cemetery where her grandparents rested. The idea comforted her until she turned onto her childhood street. She slowed down, squinting through the foggy glass. The street sign was right. The curve in the road was right. But the houses were wrong. Where her two-story family home once stood, white siding, red trim, there was a low stucco duplex she'd never seen. The big jacaranda tree that used to drop purple petals on their driveway was gone. She double-checked the mailbox numbers. Correct. And yet, it wasn't home. A strange weight settled in her chest. She told herself they must have remodeled, that memories fade, that rain can make anything look different. But even the layout of the neighborhood had changed. The turn that should have led to the school now curved into another block entirely. She drove slowly, whispering, No, this isn't right." Trying to shake the unease, Carol headed for the small cemetery where her grandparents were buried. She remembered its iron gates, the smell of jasmine that grew along the fence, the statue of an angel by the entrance. But when she arrived, her headlights illuminated nothing but a field of weeds. No gate, no fence, no markers. Just an empty lot soaked in rainwater and silence. She got out of the car, umbrella useless in the wind, and stood there staring at the place where her family's graves should have been. Her boots sank into the mud. Water pooled around her feet. It wasn't vandalized or overgrown. It simply didn't exist. Her heart pounded in her ears. She whispered her grandparents' names, as if saying them aloud could make the place reappear. Nothing. Only wind and the rustle of grass. She climbed back into the car, drenched and trembling. Her hands shook as she adjusted the GPS. Maybe she was lost. Maybe the rain had thrown her sense of direction off. She typed University Avenue, the main stretch she'd driven hundreds of times as a teenager. The route appeared familiar. She followed it. But the moment she turned onto University, the world looked hollow. The once bustling avenue was desolate. Storefronts were boarded up, windows shattered, graffiti crawling across every surface. Where there had been bright lights and late-night diners, there was only darkness. She slowed the car. The wipers clicked rhythmically. And for the first time, she noticed how quiet it was. No traffic, no music, no life. Figures appeared on the sidewalks. Not many, but enough to make her uneasy. They moved slowly, their heads down, soaked through. Something about them didn't feel right. Their clothes looked wrong, faded, but not with age, like the color had been drained from them. One man turned toward her headlights. His eyes caught the beam for just a moment, and she swore they didn't reflect. She felt a jolt of panic. Don't stop. Don't roll down the window. Don't look too long. Every instinct told her that if she acknowledged them, if she spoke, she might never get back to the world she knew. Her fingers found the door lock button. Click. She pressed the gas. The further she drove, the stranger it felt. Landmarks were missing, street names swapped, intersections that shouldn't exist suddenly there. Even the air seemed thicker, heavier, as if she were driving through someone else's dream. When the highway sign for Paris finally appeared, she exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. She didn't look back. By the time she reached the fairgrounds, her nerves were shot. She told no one what happened. How could she? Who would believe that a whole town had disappeared? She convinced herself she'd been mistaken. Wrong turn, bad weather, exhaustion, anything rational. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had slipped sideways into a version of Riverside that wasn't hers. Years passed quietly. Then her father died. His final wish was to be buried beside his parents, the same grandparents whose graves had vanished that stormy day. Carol dreaded going back. Still, she went. It was early morning when she reached Riverside again. The clouds were pale and harmless. She turned onto her old street, holding her breath. And there it was. Everything. Her childhood home stood exactly as she remembered. White siding, red trim, jacaranda tree in bloom. The cemetery gates shone with fresh paint. The angel statue waited, hands clasped as if it had never left. The world had reset. She walked between the graves, touching each headstone, half expecting her fingers to pass through them. They were solid, cold, real. Whatever she had seen that day in 2006, that dark, ruined version of her hometown, it was gone. Carol never found an explanation. Friends told her she'd been lost. Meteorologists said visibility that day was near zero, but she remembered every detail: the absence of her house, the empty lot, the people who didn't quite look alive. Sometimes, when storms roll in from the valley, she says she can still smell that night, wet asphalt and static in the air, and she feels the steering wheel tremble beneath her hands. She wonders if the line between worlds is thinner in the rain. And maybe that day, she just happened to drive through it. The cassette hissed before the music began, raw, warm, unmistakably Beatles. But the songs, none of them existed. When James Richards pressed play that night in his living room in Livermore, California, what came out of the tiny speakers made him sit perfectly still. 11 tracks, new lyrics, familiar voices. It sounded like them, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, but from a world where the band had never ended. James Richards wasn't a musician, just a lifelong fan who measured time by songs. It was early September 2009, a warm afternoon in California's Central Valley. He'd been visiting a friend in Turlock and was driving back home to Livermore with his dog Charlie riding shotgun. No deadline, no rush, just open highway and old rock on the radio. Halfway through Del Puerto Canyon, the dog began to whine. James pulled over near a scenic turnout, the kind that overlooks miles of ochre hills. He opened the door and said, "Go on, make it quick." Charlie bolted. At first, James laughed until the bark echoed somewhere in the distance. The dog had spotted a rabbit and vanished between the rocks. Cursing, James took off after her, his shoes sliding on loose dirt. The air smelled of dry grass and sun-baked stone. He was 40 yards in when his foot hit a hole. The world tilted, and everything went black. When James came to, he was no longer in the canyon. He was lying on a couch in a room he'd never seen. Plain walls, soft light, and a machine by the window that hummed like a generator and looked like a science fiction prop. His head throbbed under a bandage. Then the door opened and Charlie burst in, tail wagging wildly, followed by a man, tall, dark-haired, mid-30s. He introduced himself as Jonas. He said he'd found James unconscious in a field about 20 feet away. Now, that made no sense. There were no houses for 20 miles. Jonas hesitated before answering the next question. He glanced toward the machine by the window and said quietly, "You're not on your Earth anymore." He claimed to work for something called an interdimensional travel agency. In his world, he said, people didn't fly to space. They traveled sideways through realities. Their 1950s government had funded the ARPD program. Alternate Reality Parallel Dimensions. What NASA was to us, ARPD was to them. At first, James thought it was a joke, some weird experiment or delusion. But outside the window, he could hear traffic, smell city air. He knew that was impossible where he'd fallen. Jonas explained how his people sold machines that let citizens visit other Earths, some lush and unspoiled, some dangerous and barely habitable. There were entire industries built around it, dimensional life brokers, exploration agencies, and travel insurance for those brave or desperate enough to step through the portal. Most trips are safe, Jonas said, but some open into airless worlds or oceans or fire. You never know until you step through. He spoke with the matter-of-fact tone of a man who'd seen too much. James listened, half terrified, half fascinated. When Jonas realized his guest was still dizzy, he offered him something to eat. The ketchup was purple. The bread was greenish-gray. It tasted fine. They talked for hours about their two worlds, politics, television, sports. Then the topic turned to music. Jonas mentioned that his brother had recently seen the Beatles on tour. James laughed. "You mean a tribute band?" Jonas shook his head. "No, the Beatles. In his world, they had never broken up. John and George were alive and still writing with Paul and Ringo. They were legends there too, but current ones." Jonas pulled open a cabinet stacked with cassette tapes. CDs had never caught on in his dimension. He showed James hand-labeled Beatles albums, some titles familiar, others never heard before. He played one. The music was impossibly authentic. Lennon's voice, McCartney's bass lines, Harrison's guitar tone, Ringo's fills. Every note felt right. But the melodies were new. James listened in awe. It was like hearing history that never happened. When the tape ended, James half joked, "You should make me a copy." Jonas's expression changed. The easy smile was gone. His voice turned flat. "You can't take anything back. No souvenirs. No recordings. Nothing." He never explained why, only that it was for your safety. James nodded, pretending to understand. But the curiosity ate at him. When Jonas left to answer the door, James slipped one cassette into his pocket and shifted the others to cover the gap. Minutes later, Jonas returned and offered him dinner. James kept his hand pressed against the pocket the entire time, feeling the rectangular shape of the forbidden tape. When it was time to leave, Jonas escorted him back to the machine. The portal looked like a shimmer in the air, vibrating like heat waves. "Step through," Jonas said. "It will feel wet, but you won't get wet." He was right. Crossing felt like walking through a waterfall without the weight of water. Charlie shook herself dry on the other side. Behind him, the portal collapsed with a pop and a smell of ozone. In the dirt was a scorched line still smoking. His car was exactly where he'd left it. Night had fallen. He drove home in silence, one hand resting on his jacket pocket. Back in Livermore, he couldn't even listen to the tape. He didn't own a player. The next morning, he bought one at Walmart, plugged it in, and hit play. It was real. 11 songs, transitions smooth as any Beatles record. The cover card read, "Everyday Chemistry." He uploaded the tracks to a simple website he built himself, thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. He wrote his story there too, signing only as James Richards. Skeptics called it a hoax, a clever mashup of Beatles' solo work from our timeline. But audio analysts noticed that some vocals didn't match any known recordings. Studio tech from the era couldn't easily explain it. And no one ever found the master tape. The music remains online today, complete with that gentle cassette hiss and the faint click of buttons being pressed in another universe. James still lives quietly somewhere in California, rarely answering emails. He says he'll never try to replicate the experience. That once was enough. "I just wanted people to hear it," he wrote. "That's all. I wanted someone to know the Beatles kept playing somewhere out there." And maybe that's the most haunting part, because if the song still exists in another reality, then so might everything else we've lost. 3 stories, 3 ordinary lives that brushed against something impossible. A woman who woke up in a world that wasn't hers, another who drove into the shadow of her hometown, and a man who returned from a canyon, carrying music from a universe where the Beatles never broke up. Different places, different times, but all describing the same quiet fracture in reality. Maybe these are coincidences, or maybe, once in a while, the fabric between worlds folds over itself, and someone slips through. If that's true, then somewhere out there are versions of us, living lives we'll never remember, hearing songs we'll never know, waking up beside people who, in this world, never existed. This was Midnight Horror Society, dark curiosity for sleep. Until your next midnight session, sleep well.